desperate search intensifying tonight for a convicted murderer who escaped from a prison in Pennsylvania. Police reporting at least 4 confirmed sightings and say they are closing in on him. And now a helicopter flying overhead is playing the voice of his mother. ABC's Jay O'Brien on the scene with her urgent message.
On August 13, 1996.
This is a story that we've been following since it first broke last Friday. 10 inmates who escaped from a jail in New Orleans. Another one has been captured. I want to put this up on your screen. This is a tweet that we have there from the Louisiana State Police saying that the 5th fugitive arrested.
Gary Simmons walks into an electronics store in Mobile, Alabama, appearing like any regular shopper.
McClellan may have pleaded guilty 6 years after being charged in the kidnapping and murder of 13-year-old Tanaya Aguilar in Robinson County, but he apparently had no intention of going back behind.
He records himself on camera in broad daylight, unaware that onlookers have no idea of the dark secret he's hiding. To everyone around him, he's just another customer, but Gary is a man on the run. Just 35 miles away, he has already committed a horrifying act, leaving a trail of devastation that will soon unfold. As he stands there, you can't help but wonder, how does he continue to blend in with society while hiding such a terrifying truth? Brooks' escape just 35 miles away from the electronics store. In Moss Point, Mississippi, 18-year-old Brooke Weber's world was about to be torn apart. The day began like any other, but it would end in horror. After arriving at Gary Simmons' house, Brooke and Jeffrey Wolf, her boyfriend, were greeted by Gary himself. Something felt off. There was no porch light on, and Gary sat on the steps with a disturbing look in his eyes. But Jeffrey assured her that these were his friends, so she pushed her unease aside. The night grew darker as they entered the house, but it was only when Gary offered them drinks that the atmosphere turned chilling. While Jeffrey and Gary talked about business, Brooke sat quietly at the table, unaware that Gary's dark fantasies were about to come to life. Without warning, Gary shot Jeffrey, leaving him to fall in a pool of blood. Terrified, Brooke was grabbed by Gary, dragged into another room, and bound. She was shoved into a box, her life hanging in the balance. For hours, Brooke was trapped in the suffocating darkness of the box, praying for a way out. But when the moment came, she would find the strength to escape, her will to survive stronger than the fear that held her captive. The box Brooke's worst nightmare had just begun. After Gary shot Jeffrey, she was dragged away, helpless and terrified, and thrown into a human-sized box. Trapped and bound, she had no idea what Gary's plans were, but she knew they were not good. She was gagged and hogtied, completely at his mercy. The box was dark, cold, and suffocating. Her only company was the silence and her growing fear. Inside the box, every moment felt like an eternity. Brooke was alone with her thoughts, her body aching, her mind racing. She didn't know if she would ever see the light of day again. She didn't know if she would ever be able to escape. All she could do was pray that somehow, against all odds, she would survive this nightmare. As time dragged on, Gary's twisted plans unfolded. He came back to her cruel and cold, and told her that her fate was in her hands. Her survival depended on whether she could please him. It was a horrifying threat that filled her with dread, but despite the terror, she managed to hold on to a small spark of hope, determined to find a way out. And then, in a moment of desperation, she did the impossible. She freed herself from the ropes, pushed against the box, and broke free. With only the butcher knife left on the table as her weapon, Brooke was ready to fight for her life. The box had been her prison, but now it was her escape route. Gary's dark past, Gary Simmons' twisted nature didn't appear overnight. Long before the events of August 13th, his dark fantasies had been taking shape. Gary was a man with secrets, a man who had long harbored disturbing desires. Those who knew him, at least on the surface, saw a normal guy with a family, a house, and a steady job. But beneath the facade, Gary's true self was much darker. Gary's obsession with power and control was evident even before the murder of Jeffrey Wolf. He had a collection of short stories that were disturbing and twisted, every one of them centered around women being taken captive and forced into situations beyond their control. His wife, Lori, discovered these stories early on in their relationship. At first, she tried to dismiss them as harmless fantasies, but they were anything but harmless. Gary's fantasies were far more than stories. They were his blueprint for terror. His relationship with Lori began with charm, but after they married, things began to change. Gary's behavior grew darker, and his control over Lori escalated. It wasn't long before he began to turn his fantasies into reality, starting with Lori herself. His first act of violence was against her, an assault that left her in shock and confusion. This was just the beginning of the nightmare Lori would endure for years, as Gary's dark side continued to manifest in terrifying ways. By the time he kidnapped Brooke and murdered Jeffrey, Gary's descent into madness was complete. His actions were not just crimes. They were the fulfillment of the horrific fantasies he had nurtured for years. And for Lori, witnessing the true nature of the man she married was something that would haunt her forever. The trial after Gary Simmons was arrested, the investigation into his crimes began to unfold in shocking detail. The gruesome murder of Jeffrey Wolfe and the horrific abuse Brooke Weber endured were just the beginning of what would become one of the most chilling cases in Mississippi's history. As the trial began, the courtrooms were filled with the weight of what had happened, the lives that had been shattered, and the truth that had finally come to light. Brooke, now a young woman marked by the trauma of her captivity, took the stand as the star witness. The trial was a terrifying experience for her. Standing just feet away from Gary, the man who had locked her in the box, she was gripped with fear. But as she faced him, she knew that her testimony could be the key to ensuring he would never hurt anyone again. The fear was overwhelming, but she found the courage to speak up, to give Jeffrey and herself the justice they deserved. Gary's wife, Lori, was also involved in the trial. Her testimony was crucial, shedding light on the twisted life she had shared with Gary. She spoke of the horror she had endured, revealing the man she had married was nothing like the person she had once thought he was. It was a heartbreaking testimony, but it was necessary to show the true extent of Gary's darkness. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. Gary Simmons was found guilty on all counts, guilty of murder, kidnapping, and the abuse of Brooke. He was sentenced to death, while Timothy Milano, who had helped Gary, received a life sentence. Though justice had been served for Brooke, the trial did not bring peace. It was a painful chapter in a long story of survival, but she knew that facing Gary in court was an essential part of her journey toward healing. Healing years passed after the trial, but for Brooke Weber, the road to healing was long and filled with fear. Despite the conviction, the trauma she had endured haunted her every day. She lived in constant fear of Gary Simmons or his family coming after her. Brooke changed her name, altered her appearance, and kept moving from place to place, believing that the only way to stay safe was to hide. She spent years running, convinced that her past would never let her go. Brooke's strength, however, began to surface in unexpected ways. As she built a life of her own, she found the courage to confront her past, not only for herself but also for those she loved. In 2023, almost 3 decades after her escape, Brooke agreed to meet with Lori, Gary's ex-wife, and the woman who had once been trapped in a marriage filled with its own horrors. The meeting was emotional. Lori, who had lost so much to Gary's cruelty, looked Brooke in the eyes and thanked her for her bravery. "You are my hero," Lori told her. For the first time in years, Brooke felt a sense of closure. The healing process, which had seemed impossible, had begun. No longer defined by the trauma of her past, Brooke could finally see herself as a survivor. As she sat with Lori, sharing a moment of connection, Brooke realized that running from the past no longer controlled her. She had taken back her power. And in that moment, she knew that no matter the darkness she had survived, she had the strength to move forward. She was not just the girl in the butcher's box, she was a survivor. If you were in Brooke's shoes, would you have had the strength to escape? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more gripping true crime stories. Don't miss our next video. A forgotten voicemail revealed the motive behind the crime. Coming soon!